I think I know the short introduction, but to tell a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Ukraine. I and my family, we moved to Philly about 10 years ago in 2012. I've been working as a designer for close to 20 years. I started in high school. I got to work at like a local like a publishing house. So I got to work on some like, flyers and designing posters and all of that kind of stuff. And while being at this publishing house, I met my first client who needed some help with website. And that was still like very early, like late 90s. And I basically learned how to do some of that stuff. And we came to arrangement where in exchange for my web development services, I got free internet at home and access to all the books, which was very generous. And basically, that's how, like, over my high school, I ended up learning how to build websites. I went to school for software design, software engineering, but then I realized it's not really the same thing as building websites, because like we've been learning a lot of like high-end math and like assembler and C. That got quite boring, so I transferred to design program. But by that point, I was already freelancing, already had clients. So I kind of like focused on my career at some point, and eventually transferred from like web design more to development. And now I do both product design and front-end engineering on our products. And a lot of our tools are like focused on developers. So having kind of like exposure to both design side of things and development really helps me with my daily work. As I just mentioned, I'm a principal product designer at ActiveCampaign, and I joined the company last year. Before that, I was a lead designer at Wildbit, where we built like 4 different tools for developers. And I'm a big believer in personal projects. And that's how I probably connected with like most people in the industry and built some great friendships too. So in 2020, it was like COVID and I had some spare time on my hands. So I decided that as my team was transitioning from Sketch to Figma, we need to learn it in the most efficient way to like really rapidly get on board. And I couldn't really find any good resources or like how we can learn it. Like Figma, educational channels and YouTube was still like pretty early. And I decided that as I had all this time, I would write a book. So I wrote the book Designing in Figma, and I decided to self-publish it. That's like a very interesting experience, because aside from writing a book, you also like illustrate the book, you design the book, you publish the book, you talk to like different like formats. It's available as a EPUB and like on Amazon. So, and then like another thing you need to take care of is marketing. So as I was writing the book, I figured that like, hey, I need to somehow tell people about it. So I also started a newsletter called Figmalion, which is kind of like weekly digest of all the things that happen in Figma community, like its new articles, videos, resources, plugins, like you name it. So at this point, Figma book was like written like 3 years ago, but I still write Figmalion to this day. It just turned 4-year-old last week. And at this point, I published like 140 issues and like almost 3,000 links, just quite incredible over such a long time. I built some other tools. I built like tools for working on design systems and building accessible color palettes. I built a couple of plugins for Figma, and kind of like through my work with Figma community and Figma resources, last year I was invited to, actually this year, I was invited to speak at Config as a part of Figma Like the Pros lineup, which was probably one of the highlights of my career to date. What I wanted to talk a little bit is how Figma fits into design process and why it's unlike any other tool that I used in the past. And I'm sure you had a chance to discuss design process, and pretty much like every discussion around design process always takes kind of like the same shape. It's you start with research and brainstorming the idea for a product. You transition into design phase. You come up with some solution. From solution, you get to prototype and validation. Often you get back because what you prototyped and what you validated, you learn that it doesn't work. So you need to get back to the design phase. And then you iterate until you get a solution, and then you move to build phase. There are many variations of this process, but if you want to learn more, I can suggest this product design process handbook. Again, they are all very similar, but different companies treat them in different ways. And if you plan to go for some product designer interviews, that's something definitely helpful, because that's something that every company asks about. But every phase of the design process, it maps to different parts of the Figma in some interesting ways. So if we look at the history of Figma, I think they started in a quite a unique way. So for those who don't know, it was founded by two guys in college. It's Dylan Field and Alan Velas. And it actually started not from the product idea, which how most products start, but it started from a technical achievement. So Alan was like very technical person, and he built this WebGL demo. And he built it like 2012. So back for that moment, it was pretty unique, because like you could do stuff on the web in a browser that was thought like was pretty much impossible to do before. So after they realized that there is this capability to do advanced graphics, advanced stuff on the web, they decided to build a Photoshop on the web. But after working on it, they realized that, hey, like nobody actually uses Photoshop on the web, because, well, people take pictures on their phones. So like if you took a picture on your phone and you want to process your picture, you probably want to process on your phone, not take it to your computer. So they, as they've been working on that phase, they realized that they need to explore something different angle with graphics. And they decided to focus on user interface designers. And at that time, like personally in 2012, I was using Sketch. And before that, for a long time, I was using Photoshop, which is like great app, but absolutely bad choice for any product interface design work, because you are trying to build an interface in an app that was made to edit photos. So absolutely horrendous choice. But they got to private launch in 2015, which is again like quite incredible, because like 3 years to build something in like behind closed doors, not sharing with customers, with anyone, that rarely happens. And they started sharing with the community like about some of their advancements and some of the ideas that they are working on. So at the same time, this was like something in the air. So Adobe started working on Adobe XD, which is kind of like their take on the same problem, the app for designers. And excuse me, Figma was sharing like their process, but still it was hard to get to the actual access to the app. Only shared with like some teams that they've been working with. So they started with like exploring some ideas on how they can make work with vector graphics different, and they built some quite unique solution for that. They made their first public release in 2016, and soon after they also launched multiplayer. And multiplayer was like a huge thing, because basically the way everyone were used at this point to use Google Docs, where teams can collaborate, work on the same documents at the same time, they brought it to user interface and graphics. And for me personally, that was like a huge problem to solve, because at that moment, I was working on an app with another designer. And when two designers work on the same mockups at the same time, we've been kind of like sharing our files in a Dropbox, and we would constantly like overwrite each other's files. So like I would make changes to that get synced to the server, and then he would make changes to the same file. If I am editing the file at the same time, we would overwrite stuff. So we've been like trying to split our big project into like multiple smaller libraries. That was like a very acute problem for product teams to solve. So, and in parallel, they also launched, like not in parallel, but like a little bit later that year, they launched components. And components is, first of all, I think the name is brilliant, because like Sketch at that point, they had something called symbols, and Photoshop had symbols also. But basically, the way web was built, starting with like 2013, took a big revolution after Facebook built React. And React is like a framework for developers, which basically created this idea of breaking down the web page into like individual components that you work on individually. And they're reusable, they can have like, their own properties. Figma basically took this idea of how developers work with components and implemented it in the app. So now designers can kind of like use the same language and the same ideas and the same concepts as developers. And this is super powerful, because this bridge between design and developers gets much closer, and like this less miscommunication and more understanding. The next big thing was prototyping. And again, like I've been coloring this post-its in the different colors, and you can see how like they map to different parts, right? Like vector networks, they're related to design. Research and brainstorming, like multiplayer editing, it's kind of like a part of that. Components, part of the build process. Prototyping, useful for validation. So as I kept going, prototyping let you give you an opportunity to actually like test your ideas. And it's not only for like simple stuff as animations, but you can build basically an entire clickable mockup of your app, and like scrolling and transitions and everything. So super powerful to test your ideas, see how they actually feel in reality. Next one was developer handoff process. So you could, it was like still pretty early version where you can get some code snippets and like some special values depending on what platform your app is being built for. Then they build styles, and styles also, that's direct transition with CSS classes, right? Because like you don't want to define the same typeface, like font weight, font size, like all of these parts for every individual text object. You want to define them for your entire product and then reuse. Or the same with colors, like all your gradients, or like effects as drop shadows or things like that. And the next one was a big one. It was auto layout, and that basically took the entire design community by storm. That was kind of like the breaking point for me when I decided that, like, okay, it's time to abandon Sketch and actually transition to Figma. So I think we made a transition like late in 2019. And again, auto layout, I think the brilliant part about that, it was completely based on how Flexbox works in CSS. So the same model, the same concepts, like it's, if you already have your mockup built with auto layout in Figma, and then you give the same mockup to your engineer, it will be like not a problem for them to implement it, because like it translates one-to-one from one language to another. And between understanding of these concepts, like Flexbox and classes and React, I wanted to stop for a second and ask this like question that gets asked every month or every few months in design community, I think, is if designers should code or not. I think there is no right or wrong answer, and we will talk about design skill set in a bit. But my personal opinion is it opens it opens like your possibilities for understanding. It opens some possibilities for what you can do and what you can build. And at the same time, I can't imagine like a print designer working on some print materials and not understanding how they're actually going to be printed in the end, like what kind of process they will use. So do you need to be an expert in code? Probably not. At this point, like I used to write a lot of production code for our apps. I honestly don't do this anymore because like code also gets like much more complicated every year. But should you understand how things work, I think that would help with like general usage of your tools and everything in collaboration with engineers. So another major, two major things happened in 2019 and 2021. First one was in 2019 when Figma launched community and plugins. And that basically opened the doors for so many ideas, right? Like people started building, like I built very simple tools that like I needed for myself to work with text. They're quite primitive, but other folks built like AI plugins that would like generate your text or automate your images or create entire like mockups based on your input. So absolutely incredible stuff. And also that opened the door for all the design systems, UI kits. Like you can take something built by Apple, like Apple shares their official UI kit now at Figma community. Google shares material design. So not only you can take this stuff and explore and like learn how it's built, but you can take it and build a new app with it. And next phase was in 2021, Figma launched FigJam. And that was like, again, COVID, teams started using Figma for stuff that Figma wasn't really intended to be used for. So I know like a few creators built like team games in Figma, right? So they can do some activities with their coworkers during like Zoom meetings and during COVID. And Figma spotted this trend and like that's what people actually use Figma for. And they built FigJam, which is, in my opinion, one of the most fun apps in general. Like the interactions, details, like so much fun stuff. So absolutely incredible example. And this year at Config, they also announced Dev Mode, which is a step further in this bringing developers and designers closer together. And what they are doing now, it's still in beta, and I think they are going to start charging for it only next year when it gets out of beta. But basically, now you can use, first of all, their code generation got way better. So like if you use some components using like designed properly with like auto layout, they will actually write quite sensible code that you can use. But also they open the API for third-party plugins. So there are companies like, I think it's called Anima. Yeah, Anima. So like they build plugins that basically generate code for you based from your mockups. So again, quite incredible stuff and definitely helps with collaboration between engineers and designers. The last announcement, just like I think it was this week or last week, Figma during Config, they announced that they acquired one of the companies that was experimenting with AI in their plugins. And now they actually integrated AI as a part of FigJam. So you can create a presentation like that completely in FigJam just with AI without actually doing any work. That's not what I did. I actually put some ideas together. But it's actually very interesting to, if you have like some collaborative session with your coworkers or your teammates, you can like sort sticky notes, you can generate ideas based on your sticky notes, like you can do a lot of stuff. And I'm sure that next year at next config, they will probably do AI in Figma itself, because like so far they've been focused on FigJam and haven't really announced anything related to Figma. So if we zoom out and kind of like look at all this brief history of Figma again, I think it's quite interesting how they map different parts of this process, right? Like they build a completely separate app to just target at research and brainstorming part. They build an entirely powerful and strong prototyping tool that they work on constantly, basically. Like it doesn't get like its own app or its own like major section, but they iterate on it all the time, and it gets more powerful every day. The dev tools that they introduced at the last config, it's like incredibly powerful, and they even gonna charge for it separately because now like every engineer on your team will need a Figma license as well, basically, without access to the design tools, but only for development tools. So unlike Sketch or Photoshop in the past or Adobe XD, they actually started with like just a design phase, like with this green square, and then slowly over what's been like less than 10 years from their public launch, like 7 years, they expanded in both directions. So they went to ideation phase, but also to another phase to like target developers and prototyping. And at this point, you can basically do pretty much everything in Figma with your team, and every member of your team will need access to Figma as well. Like at my work, all the PMs product managers have access to FigJam, even if they don't use Figma directly, and now engineers will need access as well. So incredibly powerful tool, and definitely worth spending time to learn. So I also wanted to talk briefly about learning Figma, and it applies to basically any other modern tools. So even while I wrote a book about Figma, I, at this point, actually think that learning Figma from books or courses is not a good idea, because as any book or any course, it gets obsolete. So I wrote the book in 2020. I had like a revision in 2021, but until it's your like full-time job, it's impossible to keep updated with like every release, basically. And the same applies to you as a learner, right? Like even if I will keep my book updated, you're not going to be rereading it every 6 months. So I think books and courses, they have their place at the foundation of learning, like when you need to get basically from 0 to 1. You start and you build some knowledge, you understand some principles of how things work, but it's incredibly important to make learning a continuous process. Like you never know Figma completely, like once and done. Same applies to like any development or any other design tool. You need to constantly work on it and evolve and build your skills and practice. And that especially becomes more relevant today. Like when I was learning Photoshop, they would ship a new version like every year or every second year, right? So, and you could kind of like believe that you master that version that you have, even if you didn't. But now Figma ships updates like every week or every other week. So there's just like so much coming out. And like also, you're not just using Figma, you're using like all the third-party tools that integrate with it. So there is like, can be no updates from Figma, but can be a new plugin that completely changes the way you work, or a new third-party tool. So I think the most efficient way is probably by interacting with community and seeing what people in the community are doing. Figma has an entire team of designer advocates. I've heard that you'll learn from Migi from Figma, who makes amazing videos, but there are like 6 or 7 people on their team, and they can like all have different focuses. Like someone focuses more on prototyping, someone talks mostly about design systems. So very different personalities, very different interests. And so if you are on any social medias like Twitter, definitely suggest following all of their designer advocates. They do incredible job with YouTube channel. Like the quality of their material is probably like best in the industry. Like And I try to summarize all of the stuff that's happening in my newsletter. I find it like a useful way to just get an idea of what people are talking about, like what's the latest techniques, what's the latest cool things that come out. I know that like most of the Figma team, at least like on their marketing side and designer advocate side, they also read my newsletter and like they suggest me like new links when something cool comes out. So I started it because that was kind of like what I wanted, and I think it does like a service to the community. Aside from Figma, I think between Figma and interactions with other services, there are like so much interesting stuff going on. And I just wanted to share a few things that you may find useful if you want to explore. When it comes to building websites, both Webflow and Framer have incredibly powerful integrations with Figma. So I know Webflow has a plugin for Figma that basically you can take a Figma mockup and import it into a Webflow, and then after you imported the mockup, you can actually like edit it and publish it as a website. So, completely like no-code solution. I think Framer has something similar. Both of them really powerful, like no-code services with incredible animations, incredible design, and I think like if I had access to tools like that when I was starting out, I would probably not learn how to code, honestly, because like just like too powerful at this point, and especially with animation that they provide out of the box, it will take a lot of effort to build something like that on your own. Another cool service, if you're interested in mobile apps, and I know that you've been building some apps recently, there is a product called Bravo Studio. Actually, I thought I have it open, but I do not. And I think they are doing something very interesting as well. So the idea is you can connect your Figma prototype to, I think they have a chart somewhere. Yes, you basically connect your Figma prototype to Bravo Studio, and then you can create like a real app for your iPhone or Android. And they provide some APIs that you can actually use to like link some data and make it interact with some backend. But this part is optional. You don't even need to do that. Basically, if your app idea is something like more minimalistic, like some, I don't know, like knowledge app or guidance app, maybe you're trying to build like a tour for the city, you can build completely from inside Figma prototypes, publish it to Bravo Studio, and then publish it to App Store, which is mind-blowing and quite incredible. So I suggest you to give it a look. And if you're interested in animations, there are also like very cool apps recently. So one is like Lottie Lab, and that's like for small interactive animations. Like when you click a button, you want some special effect, or like you want like some loading indicator. Again, they have some integration with Figma, and you can start designing in Figma and like animate stuff. So stuff like that, yeah. Actually, nice demo. Definitely worth exploring. And another one is Arrive. That's the stuff that you can actually like design and build and just like insert it on your website later. Also pretty cool. But I know it can be a lot, especially like between learning how to build for the web, and you may want to build for mobile apps, and there are some animations, and there are some prototyping, and it feels like sometimes all these possibilities and skills that you need to do as a designer are just endless. I find it quite useful to look at your skill set as a skill map. And there are different ones. You can find the one that kind of like more aligned with what you want as a designer. I found this one pretty interesting from Norman Nielsen Lab. Basically, you're never going to be 100% in every area, right? We all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, our tendencies, interests. This one focuses on a few areas. Like if I had to rank myself, I'm more interested in building interactions and designing and prototyping. I'm less interested in doing research or working on information architecture. But at the same time, we have other designers on our team who are incredibly good with that, right? Like they would spend a lot of time just like doing some very complicated FigJam files with collecting all the data, talking to customers, just super organized. So there is something for everyone. And I think that was another one I also found it pretty good. So this one has like development and collaboration and writing and visual design and interaction and prototyping. And you can focus basically on what skills you want to grow, right? And you're never going to be a full circle, but every team needs quite unique. And actually, like even in my career, as I transitioned from my last company, which was like a very small team of like 30 something people, to my current company, which is like 1,000 people, its requirements are very different. In my last job, I had to do a lot of like product work myself. So like talk to customers, figure out what we need to build. At my current job, we have product people who actually do this as their full-time job, right? We have developers who build all this stuff, so I don't need to build it anymore. And depending on place where you want to work and like what kind of work you want to do, thinking about some skill map and areas you want to progress in can be really helpful. I think we are a little ahead of time, but that's basically pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I shared my Twitter handle and personal website and newsletter and email address, if any of you want to screenshot it and save it for later. But I'm happy to answer any questions about Figma, product design, development, career as a product designer. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for that. Everybody, everyone has a question. So I was thinking we could, you can see the chat, I think, right?
I do.
Can you see that? You can, okay, good. But I'd like you guys to turn on your microphone. I can just go down the list, or if you guys want to raise your hand, your digital hand, and I can just call on your name if you want to. Why don't you just raise your digital hand for those of you who wants to start us off? Okay, I see Christina, and then after Christina, it'll be Emily.
Hello.
Hi,
So hi. So basically, mine's like more of like a clarification question, I guess. So, I think you mentioned saying that like, correct me if I'm wrong, is there like a position where like, because I do like the UX designing part, I'm kind of getting into it with like the whole app design we just did. And I like the part of like visually making it and like, prototyping it and everything, but like the part with publishing, I still don't understand. And like, is that like there's someone for each step in some way, or is it like you create all of it in like that scenario as well?
Wait, so is that the question about the app that you've been building?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially for an app, I guess you could say, like for that kind of situation, I guess.
I think with apps, like normally you would work with a developer, right? Because
Okay.
it's app development is pretty tricky. So you need someone technical who will handle all of that. But I think that's kind of like where the Bravo Studio idea
Yeah, that was
comes
cool.
in place, right? Like, because
Yeah.
it wouldn't work for every scenario. Like if you're trying to build something that needs to like store data somewhere or do something with data, you will need a backend that will require some development. But I
Yeah.
also think I need to look closer. And like you can explore also, but at least based on my conversations with them, they wanted to create some like kind of like a library of integrations with other services. So like maybe you create an app, but it gets data from like some other place, right? And that also creates some possibilities where like without actually learning how to code entirely new app. You can get some technical chops and kind of like build some stuff together, integrate it together without actually writing code. So there are definitely some apps that I think you can build just without actually writing a single line of code.
Okay, cool. Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah. Nice. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a very cool app, the Bravo. I mean, that's really, I had no idea that existed. So that's really cool to hear about.
Yeah, I had the chance to meet with their founder at the config because I wrote about them a while ago and I just found them in my newsletter, and then we kind of connected because like I think they're a European company, so we had a chance to meet. Really cool product.
Very cool. Very cool. Emily, I think you were next. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
I thank you for such a great presentation, first of all.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could touch on kind of like what the future of Figma looks like now that AI is kind of coming into such a big role.
That's an incredible question. Probably very hard to answer, but what they talked about publicly at config, and I really like this idea that basically, I hope I wouldn't, I hope I will reproduce it correctly, but they're lowering the floor, so making like Figma more accessible to people who would otherwise not be able to use it. But at the same time, raising the ceiling. So you can do, if you have skills and knowledge, you can do more than without AI. And I think this is a beautiful way to put it, actually. And they started with adding AI to FigJam, but they announced acquisition of Diagram. Which Diagram was like this pretty cool. Yeah, that's the one. So Diagram was like this third-party startup, basically, that built a few really cool plugins for Figma that used AI, like during the last like 2 or 3 years. And they have like a magician that you can basically ask, and it will create some like stuff like icons for you. They have Genius, which is like your kind of like automator, like some companion for your stuff. I honestly, like, I use some of them. I played with them, not all of them, and it's been a while. So Automator, it lets you like automate some boring actions that you like do repetitively on your products. So because they acquired this company, I would expect to see a lot of that stuff at Figma probably very soon, right? But it's also pretty clear that how they work with like AI in FigJam, like they build in the beginning, they build what was the name? They just launched it like a few months ago, but basically they started with a plugin that you can install and use this FigJam to generate some ideas. And then they added like complete support of AI in a product. So I don't think it will like replace or do the work for you, but smaller stuff, like I know a lot of designers, especially working on like larger products, super excited and been asking Figma for a long time to let us remove all the like manual grunt work from our process, right? If I need to go and like replace my detached styles with like styles or variables, for instance, like if I need to replace every rounded corner with like 4 pixels rounding with like a variable for 4 pixels, nobody wants to do this manually. We all want to just like tell AI, hey, go do this, right? So I think they will start with some automations and basically ways to reduce the grunt work. I don't think they will get into like, hey, we will design an entire app for you. But I would also expect some integrations with AI for generating like icons and illustrations and all of that. But all of that is possible already because you just have to like either use a plugin or a third-party app. So I think the stuff that's not possible with plugins or harder with plugins is automating the grunt work, and that's probably where I would expect them to go next.
Wow, that's really cool. Thank you.
First.
Excellent. A great insight. Excellent. Who's next? Ah, good. I see you, Shay. Go ahead. And then Jason, you'll go next.
Okay, well, I can you hear me? Making sure.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm personally am not a big fan of AI, but so like hopping off of Emily's question, so it's nothing like crazy like how when AI first took off and people's artwork was getting stolen. So it's like something just to do simple tasks that is like kind of like tedious work. So it's not anything like crazy like that.
Well, that's already possible, right? Like you can already go and generate like any image you want, basically based on your request, and insert it in Figma. So, and actually, an angle I haven't mentioned is Figma is in the process of being acquired by Adobe, and Adobe already has Firefly, which is like their visual generation like AI engine. So especially if this acquisition will go through, and this is still like open question, it's still not clear if some European commissions will let it happen. But I think actually, I haven't thought about this much, but looking at how, for instance, Adobe integrated AI into their products, right? You can generate completely new images from scratch, but also stuff you can do is, for instance, you can take an image and like increase the canvas size, and it will generate the missing parts of your image, right? And that was kind of possible to do with like just a lot of like manual copy and paste and all of that. But AI does a better job of that than you probably can do manually. So I think you already can go generate any image you want and insert it in your Figma mockup. But stuff like that, where like, hey, I have this idea, for instance, for the mockup. Like, I'm working on some app, and this is my design for the app, right? Let's iterate. Like, show me 5 different variations of the screen I just designed. Like how we can try alternative versions. Like I would use that because sometimes you just need to brainstorm and like shoot ideas with someone, and that just shortens this time where like you would go to design create and work with other designers on like getting more ideas. You can just do the same kind of like thing, but with AI. I was just working on something this week, and I got feedback that like one of the buttons was not obvious, like how the label on the button wasn't obvious. So I went to ChatGPT and I was like, hey, we are working on the app or the screen for that kind of app. And like we have like that action being done, and like we need a label for the button. Give me some options. And actually one of the options that AI generated was like, I was like, oh, hey, I haven't thought about this, but this can be a pretty good choice. So we will see if it will be the final one, but it definitely led me to some ideas that I haven't thought on my own at the moment. So I would say we are far away from like, hey, I just go and design a completely reasonable like application from you from scratch, but using it like at every stage of the process to like get you more ideas or automate some work. That can be cool, and that's probably very close to where we are today.
Thank you. Excellent. Jason, I think you were next.
Yeah, hello. I think a question that I had, kind of going off of learning more about Figma's history throughout the years and how it's still like kind of a new app. It seems like it was like you said it was released in 2012. So I was
They started working in 2012. The first like public launch, which is like early beta, was in like 2016. So, but you are right, still fairly new.
So do you think right now Figma is like the standard for UI UX design, or is it like still getting there? Is it still getting popular?
They destroyed everyone basically.
Mm.
I will share my screen once again, but so there is a company, not a company, but like a community service that does a survey of design tools every year, UX tools. So let me see if I can find the report. But basically, I was keeping an eye on this report, and they've been doing it for a long time. And seeing how, like, around 2021, I would say, Figma was like just from tiny portion of all the tool set, just growing. And at some point, they completely eliminated competition in basically every area. So yeah, so for instance, that's 2022, right? Figma is basically, Adobe XD is not even close. Last time I read an article about Adobe XD, it's not killed yet officially, like it's still around, and I think they're waiting for like the acquisition to go through before they will kill it. But the article, it was like some serious like source, like big newspaper that says like they have 2 or 3 engineers basically keeping it around and like just making sure it's still working, but like nobody's actually investing time in Adobe XD anymore. And Sketch I love Sketch. I used it for a while, but they completely lost the game when it comes to collaboration. Basically, they made some like cloud solution, and it was very meh. So in reality, like Figma just killed everyone. And actually, let me see if I can go back to, okay, I was wondering if I could like just see the results for other years. But you can check the website. It's uxtools.co. I'm sure they have like somewhere like older reports too. It's really interesting to see how basically over the course of like 5 years, everything aside from Figma got completely eliminated. And what's also interesting is they have different categories for like prototyping. Prototyping still, Figma is #1, right? Advanced prototyping, so probably not Figma. Yeah, Protopy, Azure, Webflow. So that's kind of like when you already build stuff. Design systems, I'm sure Figma is still #1. Yes, Figma, and other things are not even like Figma replacements. That's something you use with Figma to like create documentation for your design systems. So it was interesting to notice how like not only in UI design, but when it comes to like prototyping, user testing, like developer handoff process, where like basically you take stuff from Figma and pass it to developer. You need sometimes help to package the stuff. Like they've been just eliminating competition like year over year. So I would say, yeah, if there's one tool you need to learn right now, like Figma is that tool.
So we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. All right, who is next? Did I see Maddie? Did I see your hand? And then I'll see JD after Maddie.
Yeah, I did raise my hand. So I'm kind of at the point where I'm working towards graduating with my associate's degree, and I'm looking to go in the work field, and I'm really confused as to where to go. So I kind of wanted to ask you, like, how did you start in, product design and going in specifically to like development tools? Like, how did you where you are now, essentially?
Like I read this advice somewhere, and it really resonated with me that like when you are in the beginning of your path, the best person to ask for advice is not someone who is like 20 years ahead of this path, but like someone who is like 3 or 4 years ahead. Because honestly, like my experience of starting up was like so different in like early 2000s in Ukraine versus like you here, right? That probably the way my career went, it wouldn't apply to you. If I can share like some of general recommendations and what I see people struggle with, because like it's this like vicious cycle where like you don't have a portfolio, but everyone asks you for experience and portfolio, but you don't have experience and portfolio, so you can build an experience and portfolio, and it goes and goes. As I mentioned, like I'm a big believer in side projects. Yes, that's like where you can build stuff that you care about. Nobody can stop you. Nobody can tell you that like some requirements or anything. If you have an idea for something, you can build it exactly the way you want, right? Like, so I didn't need the permission to write a book or start a newsletter and like start just sharing the stuff I know. It's basically free. So if I were starting today, I would probably try to find some passions and some interests and like stuff I can build something to share with everyone the way I see it and the way I want it. Because chances are you could probably do a better job building a project that you are passionate about than doing like some commercial project for a client where like you get a bunch of requirements. And that's also important, right? Like part of your job is going to be working with these requirements. But by focusing on side stuff, you can actually use like your full creative possibilities.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. JD, and then I saw Anna's hand after JD. Are you going to put it in the chat, JD? Okay. JD's microphone doesn't work, so.
Okay, yeah, I'm reading the question.
Okay.
That's a good question. So I would say with Figma, like I switched to Figma in 2019. And actually I was just recently recalling with someone that experience, but 2 years before that. So like, as I mentioned, they had first public release in 2016. And I think I got like an invite even before that. So like earlier in 2016. And I remember this conversation with one of my coworkers where I was like, this is completely unusable. This is like garbage. Like, how can anyone use that? Because like nobody, it's just impossible to use for any serious work. And then 2 or 3 years later, like I actually switched my entire team to Figma. Because they've been like iterating just so rapidly fast and doing such an incredible job. So I would say the pivot moment when I saw like a bunch of teams switching was like 2019, 2020. Actually, when I started a newsletter, I had like a separate section basically in every issue called switching to Figma. Because like there were like articles every week about like another big team migrating to Figma, and they were sharing their experience and how that went. And I was sharing a lot of these articles like in 2020, 2021. I don't think I shared a single one in the last like 2 or 3 years, just because like everyone already migrated, like everyone already used Figma. There's like nobody left in Sketch or anyone else. So it's very hard for me to, so yeah, first question, like I would say like around 2020, 19, like around that age was like when I saw a major adoption of design tools, of Figma across design tools. When it comes to competitor, honestly, looking at these charts that I shared like a little bit before, they seem like so well ahead of everyone that I don't think there's like any, second best choice at the moment. But if I had to take like a wild guess, I would maybe look at what Webflow and Framer are doing. That's not a replacement for Figma, right? Because like it's basically building websites, but their design tools, like built-in design tools, so powerful that technically you can start like designing and building at Webflow or Framer and just kind of like go from there, especially if you start not from a blank page, but like from some template that you kind of like iterate on. But again, like that's not going to solve the problem for I lost my train of thought.
Prototype?
For other use cases like mobile apps and everything else, like if you're trying to do that. If we look back at like the charts, I think number 2 and number 3, Adobe XD and Sketch. And like I have no trust in Adobe XD. I think it's completely abandoned at this point. Sketch is doing interesting work, but there are so many things that need to come at the same time and moment for the team to use Sketch. I know even like a major news where like Apple was very well known for the fact that they've been sharing their UI kit only in only in Sketch format. So everyone were like, what the hell? Like everyone switched to Figma and you still share your UI kits for Sketch. Like who is gonna use them? And even Apple this year, they published like after WWDC, which is like their conference for developers, they share their UI kit in Figma, not in Sketch anymore. And Apple is like so focused on like privacy, and like Sketch is like a beautiful native app. So even they stopped using it from what I know. So honestly, I don't think there's like a second best app you could kind of like look at and learn. If you want to learn more, just like look at other apps that you can use with Figma, right? Like something for animations or building stuff on the web or building on mobile or anything like that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good question, JD. Anna, I know I'm going to pause for just a minute. I just realized we're at 4:30. Do you have time to take one more question, or are you
One more
out of
question,
time?
yes, and I have
One
to
more
go
question?
after that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I just realized what time it was. So Anna, you're our last question. Make it good.
Oh my God, I don't know.
No pressure.
Well, thank you so much, Eugene, for being here with us today. And I just wanted to ask you, because you were mentioning during your presentation that even though you read Pygmalion and that you at the moment thought it was like good book, it's true that Figma like updates itself so fast that it's difficult to kind of just learn from books. So what do you think is the best way to like learn a software like Figma for like us students that are like constantly trying to learn all these apps for like work or design?
I would start, honestly, if I was like starting from scratch, I would start with Figma YouTube channel probably, because the knowledge that they share are just incredible and they go into like such in depth. I know there are lots of like design influencers, right? Like people who have like all their courses and stuff. I think one thing to keep in mind is when people sell like $600 courses, they're not selling them for college students. They're selling them to designers who get reimbursed from their work for these courses. So like I would never pay $500 or $600 for a course, because like if my company wouldn't pay for it itself. And I absolutely believe that like you can get the same knowledge from YouTube channels and just like reading and picking up stuff. That's kind of like big thing for me with Figmalion, because like I just try to share like basically if you will subscribe and read like a few things from every issue every week, in a year you're probably going to be like in a very different place. But it also helps to have some foundation, right? So like if you read about some advanced design systems topic and you don't even know like how to use components or variables or how libraries work, that's kind of like the foundation that YouTube channel Figma can actually help you build.
Thank you.
Good question. Well, I thank you so much for giving us your time and knowledge. This has been amazing. I've recorded this session so our students could watch it again and get all of this knowledge and kind of rewatch it and kind of learn through your talk. I really appreciate the time. And if you guys all can help me thank Eugene for his time and the resources you've shared with us. Your book, Figmalion, it's huge. It's so helpful. And if they haven't all signed up for, I'm going to really encourage them to sign up, because I learn so much when I get your newsletter every week. It's so helpful to me. So
Well,
thank
you
you
so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you all, and great questions, really engaged. So fantastic time. Thank you so much. I shared my email and websites and everything in the end of the presentation. So if you can Google it, if you have questions or I can help in some way, just feel free to email me or reach out in any way.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Lovely.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Eugene. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.